this process helped me go through it. It wasn't easy, but it was, as I said before, sitting down and having to ask myself honest questions like, this man is not the villain of your life. He is as much a victim as anybody else in this narrative. Why is he in the circumstance that he is in? This is not to excuse any of the bad things that happen. That's not the point right now. If you're going to be honest in telling this story, you must understand what his motivation was. As a young man, I never asked myself that question.
Well, that was celebrated painter turned filmmaker Titus Kaphar, our guest on this week's edition of Conversations from Studio 5. He's the writer and director for the film Exhibiting Forgiveness. It's the story of an artist coming face to face with his estranged father and the challenge to forgive. So Titus, you did the documentary as well as paintings and then decided that wasn't enough. What happened?
Well, to answer that question directly, the documentary did a really good job of telling us where we were. That is with the relationship between my father and I. Mm-hmm. But it didn't tell us how we got there. Mm-hmm. And doing it as a narrative fictional film allowed me to get there. But this never started as that. That's not what I set out to do initially. I set out to help my children understand a little bit better, my two sons, about their father and about the world that I come from and how different that world is from the one they're growing up in. And that started because when they were young, they often asked me about my father and my relationship to him. And I'd say stuff like, I'll tell you more when you're older. I'll tell you more when you're older. Well, my oldest is 17, going off to college next year. Wow. Seems like the right time to be having this conversation, if not a bit late.
Just curious, what's the conversation been like between you and him now that I imagine he's seen this work?
I mean, I feel like they do get it now. We're jumping really ahead. But I just want to say from the outset that the character of the father is not the villain in this story, and my father is not the villain in my life. Writing this script helped me really come to terms with that reality. And that said, my father attempted to teach me a work ethic in the same way that he was taught that work ethic. And it was the best of his ability at that time. That's what it was. And I want my children to have that same drive, but I have got to find other means to inspire that in them. And my children and I now have a much more open conversation about my upbringing, and it has been beneficial for the relationship, for sure.
Tell me what the process was like, because you primarily have expressed yourself on canvas as an artist, to go from being an artist on canvas to actually creating a film.
Rungs on a ladder, you know. If I had jumped to the top, it would have never succeeded. It was, one rung at a time. And the first rung, that is the script, was possible because I wasn't thinking about a script. I was thinking about writing a letter to my sons. How do I tell them this story? And it started with me waking up in the morning and starting to write. And so I'd wake up about 5 o'clock in the morning, write for a couple of hours, take my kids to school, and then go to the studio. And when I was in the studio, I would listen to what I had written that morning. I have this app on my phone that allows me to listen to what I've written. And while I was listening, images and pictures of the past and other kind of artistic inspirations were coming to me. And so I started to sketch and I started to paint. And so the familiarity of putting brush to canvas made it possible for me to work through this process of writing that I had never done before, because the writing and the painting were actually connected. So once I went through that, I had essentially a narrative that I turned into a script, and then I had, from that narrative, I had a series of paintings as well. So in many ways, they evolved at the same time. So those are two steps up that ladder. Getting it to the screen, that's a very different kind of exercise. And it's a kind of exercise that is unfamiliar to me, in that you have to be so reliant on so many other people for the success of your project. That scares me. I was raised to be self-reliant as possible, to not lean on people, like to get it done yourself. This is not that. Film is a necessarily collaborative venture, and I feel blessed by the experience that I had. People who decided to come on this project believed in the mission of the project, believed in the narrative and what it had the capacity to do in hearts and minds once it existed into the world, once it was fully realized.
Let's talk about the casting for a moment. I mean, you have cast everyone so perfectly. I love every single scene of the film. What was happening for you as you're watching all of this unfold?
What was I feeling? How? How? This is my first film. How did Anjanou Ellis Taylor, Andre Holland, John Earl Jelks, Andrew Day all agree to be in my first directorial debut? Like, yeah, man, I felt humbled. I felt really, really, really humbled. I don't know how else to say it. I had the pleasure of not just working with these people, but building relationships with them. I've seen them as stars in my head for so long. I've watched almost every single thing that they've done. And then it was just about a friendship. Like, how do we build this friendship so that we can trust each other as we go through this incredibly difficult text? And I feel lucky in that we still do have a great relationship. I'm still very much in touch with my cast. And so many, no, not so many, every single one of my cast member has a relationship to this narrative, whether it's they are the son, or they are the child, who is now living in the sort of generational healing that was executed by the father, right? They're that next generation, the Jermaine in our film. Everybody had that, or they're the mother, or they see their mother going through it. Everyone had some relationship to them, to the script. So it wasn't, they weren't playing. I don't know how else to put it. They weren't playing. And Andre and I were having this conversation yesterday. There were definitely moments where it was clear to us that we were working not just in the physical realm, that there was something that was being gifted to us in those moments. And the beautiful thing about that is it's not us. It's not us. I can't take credit for it. I can't pretend like, oh, Titus is so good, he's so whatever. I can't do that. There's stuff that happens in this film and you feel it. It's very clear to me that we had some covering on this.
With that said, what role does faith play in getting all this done, and also in the lives of the characters, yourself included, in exhibiting and finding that path to forgiveness?
So I say this all the time. people of faith love me most in the world. Those are the people who saved my life. After this moment where you see the child in the film, I was taken in by a Haitian immigrant as a freshman in high school, and he took me in because he's a believer. And the story of Jesus is not a story to him. And when you see someone in need, you go and help them out. So he saw my mother and I in need. And although he had a wife who was dying of cancer, he already had 3 sons of his own. He took in me, my mother, and my brother in a 2-bedroom apartment because he felt like that's what Jesus was telling him to do. So I may not have a practice that looks like what other people want it to look like, but whether there is a God in my life has never, ever been a question for me. The people, as I said, the people who have nurtured me, cared for me, built my moral principles and values, that's the world they come from. So what does faith have to do with this project? Brother, has everything to do with this project.
So I'm curious, where's that man now?
We are still very close. My children know him as their grandfather. He became such an important part of our life. That's the one they knew as a grandfather. So while my birth father was wandering through his desert, his name is Mars Severe. He was the one that came up and showed me what it meant to actually be a father.
How are you feeling having your first film under your belt?
It doesn't feel under my belt yet. I thought it was. And then there's the part where you have to bring it into the world. It feels like a surprise every time. I wasn't trying to make something. Let me say it in the positive. I was just trying to be honest. I was trying to make something that was vulnerable and truthful enough that my children would be able to connect to it. The result has actually been that the film has opened up things for viewers that I just never expected. I've been making paintings for almost 20 years, man. I've done hundreds and hundreds of exhibitions. My work has been on the cover of Time magazine. I'm in MoMA, I'm in the Metropolitan, I'm like all over the place. And I can tell you, I've made nothing in my career that comes close to the responses that I've received from this film. That's why I say, this ain't me. This is not about something I was capable of doing. There's more. And a significant portion of that is just the nature of what it means when you bring all of these people together who are focused on the same vision, and have these values and work together to elevate something. All of that energy gets wrapped into the project. And then you have that special thing that is even beyond that. So it doesn't feel under my belt yet. Now it feels like the film is doing its work. So I'll give you an example. So we had a screening at Morehouse just the other day. Showed the film, had a great question and answer. And I could tell, I'm on stage and I can tell that these young men are really feeling. They are really feeling. And they're asking these beautiful questions because Morehouse men are brilliant. We get done, I walk off stage, I'm leaving the building, and the entire group surrounds me. They circle me, and they have questions. And one man in particular, he kind of tries to whisper in my ear in this group. He says, I don't know that I can forgive my father. I don't know that I can forget all of the things that have happened that he did. And I said to him, I said, this is not about you saying that what your father did was right. You don't have to say that. That's not true. That's not about this. This is about you not having to carry this burden into the future and pass it on to your children. This is not a kind of forgiveness that requires you to continue to put yourself in harm's way. This is a kind of forgiveness that says, I don't hold this debt against you anymore. You don't owe me nothing. We're clean. But I have to go this way. This is the direction my path is taking me. And I see that your path is taking you this way. Know that while you're on that journey, there's nothing that you need to come back to me for in terms of something you owe. That is the kind of thing that will give you the space to be able to do the healing work that you need to do. Mm-hmm. I told the young man, if you keep carrying this, it's not going to affect him. It's going to affect you. You got to figure out how to find that. And that's the journey that the character goes on, and the character goes on that journey because that was the journey that I went on.
Mm. How difficult was the journey?
A friend of mine said, after seeing this film, he said, Titus, it's interesting. You've been painting this movie your entire career. Mm. And I realized that he was right. And I say that to say that it was just the right moment in my life. If someone had asked me to do this 17 years ago, it wouldn't have worked. And the reason it works now is because I am desperate to make sure that my children do not repeat the same kind of acting out of brokenness that I did, and that they don't inherit what I inherit from my father. And so this process helped me go through it. It wasn't easy, but it was, as I said before, sitting down and having to ask myself honest questions like, this man is not the villain of your life. He is as much a victim as anybody else in this narrative. Why is he in the circumstance that he is in? This is not to excuse any of the bad things that happen. That's not the point right now. If you're going to be honest in telling this story, you must understand what his motivation was. As a young man, I never asked myself that question. Mm-hmm. I didn't even care about the answer to that question. It's only as a father that I can say, I have got to come to some conclusion about this. I have got to clarify this so that I can make sure that my boys are free.
How difficult do you think it was for your dad to forgive himself?
I don't know that my father has forgiven himself.
Wow.
I don't know that my father has forgiven himself. There's a lot, and this is part of where my compassion for him and his circumstance comes from. Mm. I now recognize the kind of, I'm not going to put my father's stuff on blast, but I now understand all that he went through. And I now understand what he carries, and I know what he saw. And those interviews that he did where he revealed himself and told me a bit more, because again, that comes from the documentary, mm-hmm. changed my interpretation of the situation. But it also made it clear to me that the last generation finds it very difficult. My father's generation finds it very difficult to be honest and sometimes critical about some of the harm that was done in those particular situations, because there is such a tradition of respect for your elders. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but if you are unwilling to acknowledge that that was even harmful to you, then you're going to end up blaming yourself for it. Mm. And I think for a lot of folks of my father's generation, there wasn't the space to work through those things. Nobody could afford a therapist. Yeah. Nobody going to a therapist. My family's from Mississippi. My great aunties and grandma, they were literally picking cotton off like sharecropping, and then came up to Michigan. So we come from a tradition of, you got to work. I know you're going through some things right now, but you got to work. That's what we got to do. That's where that work ethic comes from. And so folks, because of their strength, were able to push through some of the most horrific things that humanity has ever experienced. And now my generation is like, okay, we respect all that, but we got to work through some of this stuff. We got to talk about it, y'all. I know it's dirty. I know we don't like it. I know it hurts, but we cannot shove it down another generation. We want to deal with this stuff so the next generation is not dealing with it in the same way. They're gonna have plenty enough to deal with, as we already know. They have plenty to deal with. So I knowing that, I know my father is on his journey, and I am convinced that he will reach the destination. But I don't know that he has forgiven himself. Wow. I can say to you, I don't hold this against you anymore, but I don't know that. Yeah.
Wow. Now, in terms of this production, I know that you asked the main character, who plays a painter, to actually learn how to paint. Why was that?
Because I do it every day. You know, I paint every day, or I draw every day. And I've seen so many movies about artists, and, you know, they end up being these cliches. And when you shoot in this way, where you don't have somebody who actually knows the skill, you can tell. Now, maybe other people who don't do that thing can't tell, but artists can tell. You have never picked up a brush before in your life. What are you doing? Nobody holds it like that. What are you doing? Like, what clear? Or that classic thing that happens in films about musicians playing pianos. You see just their hands, but you never see their face and their hands at the same time. I didn't want to make that movie. I just so I said, Andre, if you want this part, you have got to commit yourself to the craft. So for 3 months, he came to my studio. I gave him lessons. I gave him books. We painted together. I taught him as much as I needed to teach him in order to be able to be proficient. So when we were shooting, I could shoot for this angle or that angle, whatever looked right for that scene without any restrictions. And Andre is exceptional. He pours himself into a character in a way that just distinguishes him from other actors in the field. I'm not saying nobody else does that, but I'm saying the distinguished ones are the ones that do that. So he completely gave himself over to the practice. And to the point where, now listen, I made all of the paintings in the film, but the film works so well, and I can say this humbly, it worked so well that my gallery came to me and said, hey, so do we got to give Andre credit for painting the paintings? I was like, no, look, when Superman flew in that movie, you weren't thinking he was really flying. It just looked like he was flying because that's what the movie's supposed to do. So no, we do not have to do that. That's not what happened, y'all. So it was, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I guess I did my job. I guess that worked.
Pretty convincing. Take me back to the set. What was that like? What do you recall most?
I mean, there are two moments that are seared in my mind and will be there forever. The first was the day that we were painting the whitewash scene. So how we did that was set up painting, we're ready for the scene, got the camera in place, doing all this thing. And then Andre would go to the canvas and he would make a mark on the canvas. I would say action. Andre would go. He starts making marks on the canvas. Let him paint for a little bit. I say cut. I put on my coveralls. I jump in and I start making the actual painting. I start fixing the painting. And then I say action. Andre comes in. He does his thing. I say cut. I come in. I jump and I start painting. And there's this back and forth. And I'm fixing these things because what I need from him is I just need him to have the right energy. I need him to hold the brush correctly. I need him to be in that moment. But I need to make the painting. And so I'll never forget that, this kind of back and forth thing of trying to direct and make a painting at the same time is, probably not very common in history. So that was one. But the other one I think is even more important. And that is the scene where Terrell and LaRon are upstairs at the gallery and they are having this conversation. Now, that conversation is almost verbatim the conversation that I had with my father. It wasn't in the gallery, it was in my studio. And I remember having that conversation. I remember being frustrated, but I didn't allow myself to feel all the things that one might feel in that particular context when somebody is saying that. But when we were shooting, Andre was locked in. He wasn't acting, he was manifesting. It was more. And there was something incredibly profound about me witnessing somebody go through exactly what I went through. And all of a sudden, I felt it. I started sobbing. I broke. I could not stop crying. I had to leave the set, lock myself in a room, lay on the floor for half an hour, just while these waves of pain and tears just washed over me again and again. I'm not that guy. I'm not a big crier like that. But I just could not stop. And I realized in that moment, there is so much more work for me to do in this area. I have suppressed a lot in my life, a lot of my experience. And I just had to give myself to that moment and just say, okay, let's let this work be done. Let's let this work be done. I'm not going to resist anymore. I'm not going to fight it anymore. Let's just go. Because I was not winning. I was not winning that fight. So you just have to let it come over you. I get back to the set and my cast and my crew are hugging me, coming up beside me, making space for me. We got you, no worries. We can do this. We can do this. It was a meaningful part of my healing process. I didn't set out to make this film and be like, yeah, on the third to last day of screening, I'm gonna go through this whole emotional, and it's gonna take me on this journey, and I will come closer to my healing. That's not what I set out to do in any way, shape, or form. But God had other plans, I guess.
Yeah. I'll end with this. If you could go back and talk to young Titus in light of all that you've been through and where we're sitting right now, what would you tell that little boy?
First, I would tell him it's actually okay to feel what you feel. I know others are telling you that it's not, that there's something wrong with what you feel. Don't shove that down like that. It's going to come out eventually. So give yourself the space to feel what you feel. That would be the first thing. And then the next thing is, I would say, I know it feels hopeless right now, but I'm telling you, we do all right. We do all right.
Exhibiting Forgiveness is in theaters right now. We want to thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of Conversations from Studio 5. We appreciate you making this your weekly destination for uplifting interviews with a strong focus on faith. For more information on the show, be sure to check out our Facebook page. You can also find us on Instagram simply by searching Studio 5. Hope you'll join us again right here next week on the podcast. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.